All right, so this is JayzTwoCents talks about Intel 9.5/10/ who knows gen.
Today's video is brought to you by CableMod and the CableMod Configurator. If you want custom cables for your computer and you want them custom made with your colors and your choices and your configs, you can do that on the CableMod Configurator. They support all major brands of PSUs, both modular and semi-modular, and you can have cable extensions made. But the best part is, previously they offered aluminum cable combs in only black and white, but now you can get them in various colors. So if you want to take your system to the next step and really make it pop, get some custom cables and make them your way with the CableMod Configurator. You can start playing around with that by using the link in the description below.
All right, so we've got some things to talk about today with Intel 10th gen. IFA is going on, which we were invited to, but I don't want to go all the way to Berlin for a couple of days when I can get all the information here at home and bring it to you as quickly as possible. Now, we are not talking about all the specifics of 10th gen. I'm not going through all the crazy SKUs. I'm not going through all of the specs. I'm coming at you from a personal perspective, which I know is going to basically align with a lot of you because I'm in the middle of a personal rig update. I've got it behind me. You guys have seen the build logs. And I'm finding myself in a position with which I know a lot of people are going to be in. I'm building a computer right now. New processors are on the way. Is it worth waiting for? Well, I guess the answer is yes and no. So there's the end of the video, right there, yes and no. So I've got some notes that I've been taking here. So if you see me glancing down, it's because I'm reading my notes that I took. And at the same time, this is just one of those talking head videos, which has a nice kind of a mellow underscore. Or maybe Phil put some like death metal underneath the talking of this. I don't know. Does it work? Does it work? So obviously, my audience, I think for the most part, is super excited for any new desktop processor SKUs. The problem is Intel has been extremely hush-hush regarding any new desktop SKUs. In fact, they've been very keen to push their like 10 to 15 different notebook SKUs spanning across 9.5 gen, which I'm calling it 9.5 gen because I'm sorry. It's 14 and 9 pluses behind it pretty much at this point, which is a super refined manufacturing process. There's nothing, look, I find myself personally in the camp of, I don't care what process it is. I don't give a crap about any of that. I care about what the end user performance is at the end of the day. End user performance at the end of the day is all that matters. I don't care. So a lot of people are caught up on the fact that Intel is once again manufacturing on the 14 nanometer node. I don't care, to be honest. Now it's funny because a lot of what we're dealing with today has specifically to do with Ryzen's success. Now back in 2016 when Ryzen first launched with the 1800X being an 8-core 16-thread desktop processor, which the only thing Intel had currently matching that was on their Extreme platform, which was a 5960X, a CPU that I personally had. Intel made a very specific statement. We believe the consumer is going to adopt a wait and see. That's because the consumer had been duped by AMD quite a few times with the hype train derailing, roadmaps pushing out, or just completely over-promise and under-deliver, which was kind of rightfully so for Intel to sort of take that position, thinking people may not adopt this right away. The problem is, what happened is it performed, and it performed very, very well. And Intel wasn't really answering it because AMD was answering Intel. So let's go ahead and fast forward now to 2019. Back at CES of 2019, 9 months ago, we saw some of the very first high-level data starting to leak regarding Intel's Ice Lake. Now here's the problem. We're now 9 months later after that. Ice Lake is in market, but it's only in mobile. The problem is you have 3 SKUs, or 3 families now that we're talking about. Ice Lake, Comet Lake, and Cascade Lake X. Well, we'll get to Cascade Lake X in a second because that's the good stuff when it comes to desktop processor buyers. In fact, Hardware Canucks did a really good piece about the product naming and how confusing it is and what the hell is going on over there. And I'm gonna put a link to their video down below. It's definitely worth watching. Eber did a fantastic job of breaking down the part numbers, the specs, and trying to break through all of the confusion. Like I said, I'm not doing that here today. I'm gonna let the people who are much better at explaining that handle that. Guys like Gamers Nexus and Hardware Canucks and all of them. So please go and check out my peers. They make fantastic content. But moving forward, we've got Ice Lake, which is based on the 10 nanometer process. The process that we've all been waiting on. Now, yes, AMD is currently on a chiplet structure with 7 nanometer in there with 14 nanometer IO chiplet on there. And there's a lot of debate on whether or not it's true 7 nanometer, but I digress. Intel's going straight to 10th gen, not to 7 nanometer, which is supposed to be, I guess, manufacturing in 2021. So as you can see, you still got a bit of a wait there. but you've got one of the most confusing product stacks on the market. You've got for Comet Lake alone, you've got a Y designation and a U designation, which is then denoting the difference in performance based on the graphics and the core speed and the core count and all that sort of stuff. Now that aside, if you're a notebook fanboy, well, you're seeing about a 16% uplift in performance versus the previous part number, which was, so they compared the Intel Core i7 10710U versus the i7 8565U. So let's go ahead and talk about desktop processors, because that's what I think my audience truly cares about, because most of you guys are DIYers building gaming rigs, streaming rigs, or just enthusiast rigs, because why the heck not? Well, Ryan Shrout, formerly of PC Per, now working for Intel and like an enthusiast marketer something or another title. I don't know, Phil could put it down here below. It's really weird. They have only talked about two things when it comes to next-gen desktop processors, one of which you kind of already know about. They talked about at Computex, which was Intel's only answer to Ryzen 3000 series, that being the 9900K, again, but this time with an S, for keep spending. That's what everyone sort of dubbed it, right? Keep spending, just like NVIDIA Super is super expensive. The 9900KS is a current part number that is already on the market. The difference is it's got an all-core boost of 5 gigs. Now, I've personally built a few 9900K rigs, all of them boosted to 5 gigahertz on all cores by simply checking one box on an ASUS processor or any motherboard. Any motherboard on the market, though, can lock all cores. I've personally not found one yet that can't do it. Even Phil's little small ITX rig, if you can keep the temps under control, can hit 5 gigs. So that's nothing worth writing home about. That's sort of a cop-out. That's, to be honest, an AMD move, because AMD did the same thing back with FX when they came out with the 9590. That was nothing but an AMD FX 8350 that could overclock to 5 gigahertz out of the box. So congrats, Intel. You just pulled a 2013 AMD marketing move. Let's talk about Cascade Lake X. Skunk rigs. Now, Skunk rigs started out on a mainstream processor.
You literally said skunk rigs.
Did I? Now, Skunk Works started out on a 4790K. That was Devil's Canyon. And then from there, it went to the 5960X, and then it stayed on the X platform ever since. Because to get the core count that I always wanted was only available on the X SKU. Now, the difference here is that we don't know anything about Cascade Lake X. Skylake X, which is what the 7980XE and both the 9980XE are based on, has been around now since 2017, 2 years. Not long-winded by any stretch. Mine can all overclock to about 4.6, 4.5 on all cores, on standard water cooling, which isn't bad whatsoever. So Skunkworks is currently sitting on an i9 7960X, which is a 7th gen, 16-core, 32-thread processor. It runs extremely hot, and it's delidded. I did a whole series about that because of Intel's terrible choice to, even on the extreme processors, which for the longest time were always soldered, had terrible TIM. So I did the delid and I did the lapping of the IHS and all that sort of stuff, and it helped, but it still gets hot. If I run Cinebench right now on Skunkworks with a dedicated thick 480 millimeter radiator doing nothing but cooling the CPU, still hits 90C. It's a little ridiculous. And the 9960XE, or whatever the part number is the exact same thing as the 7th gen stuff, only soldered, and then binned, and a little bit better performance in terms of boost clocks and all that sort of stuff as well. So that's why in my system right here, I'm doing the 9980XE, which is an 18-core, 36-thread, not a 3175X, which I've talked about, which now puts us into the whole point of this video of thinking about as a buyer. Is it worth waiting for the mystery processor? Well, if I look at history, and I know what's now happening, and that we've reached the 5 gigahertz wall in terms of where our silicon can perform every day, and seeing that now all the brands are branching out by maximizing core count, I don't need more cores. I'm gonna get at least 4.5 on this 9980XE all day long. It's the same processor we used to do our original RIP-GN series, which has now moved on to way more extreme stuff since then. It's a soldered IHS, it's lapped, it's gonna perform well. Right now, we don't know when the new stuff is gonna launch. Rumor says October. So I find myself going, do I wait? Do I wait until October? Do I then have to deal with new motherboards, new BIOS maturity, who knows what funkiness we'll deal with? Every single new Intel and AMD launch we have ever done on this channel, we usually have it before the public does, which means we are kind of the beta testers. So are you, if you buy it on day one availability. Do I want to go through that again, or do I want to go with a process that has been around, it has matured, the BIOS is working, I know this system is going to fire up and work on day one? Or do I want to take the chance of putting it all together and having some funky BIOS happen? Or even have manufacturers send me a new BIOS that is supposed to fix problems and brick the motherboard. Do you guys remember when the first Crosshair motherboards came out for Ryzen? And I did a whole video about the fact that I did a BIOS update and it bricked, and I had to take my rigid tube system all apart and wait for a replacement motherboard? Stuff like that happens when it comes to cutting edge, bleeding edge technology. It's called bleeding edge because it hurts. It hurts because you're the tester. So personally for me, that's not something that's worth waiting for, especially with the amount of cryptic information that Intel's willing to share at this time. I mean, look, you're losing market share to AMD, which is great. I love to see the hero live long enough to become the villain. I am just that kind of guy. I love to see the halos fall and the horns come out and then the pitchforks come for you. NVIDIA needs to experience that as well, as far as I'm concerned. But the fact that Ryzen has caused this much of a stir in the CPU space, we've got to wait for Intel to respond to AMD. AMD's put all their cards on the table, and we haven't even talked about the possibilities of new Threadripper CPUs. We know that the X platform has fallen behind Threadripper when it comes to core count and productivity and workload. But as I've already said, core speed is more important to me than core count, especially since this is technically a gaming rig. I'm not even gonna be using it for editing and stuff. I could put a 9900K in here and still have a great gaming experience. But the problem is, Skunkworks is always, and this isn't Skunkworks, but this is Skunkworks' successor, is supposed to be kind of about big and overkill and loud and boisterous and basically me in computer form. It's one of those things where I personally will not be waiting for the next generation of Intel processors. And if you're building a system right now, or consider buying or doing an AMD system or even a current Intel system, I would continue going forward with your plans if you're AMD, if you're team AMD and building an AMD rig. If you're currently waiting for Intel though, or you're thinking about buying an Intel, that I would wait for. Rumor has it that when the 9900KS comes out, the 9900K will still remain, but there's supposedly going to be a discount or a price reduction coming for the 9900K and potentially even the 9700. I don't have confirmation on that, but that's what the rumor is through sources that are close to the subject matter but not authorized to comment. I would just sort of wait at that point. I mean, if you can get a 9900KS for the same price as a 9900K and it's guaranteed 5 gigahertz and you can wait another month or two, then by all means, that is definitely worth doing. So this is one of those things where without even seeing Intel's current desktop lineup, I'm willing to say that I think AMD is the clear winner of 2019. AMD's come out and shown year-on-year improvements on their process. It's not getting the core speed that we're expecting to see, but what's funny is if you look at Ice Lake on the 10 nanometer versus Comet Lake on the 14 plus to the third power, then what you'll see is there's actually a reduction in boost clock on the 10th gen stuff versus 14 nanometer. So it's one of the reasons why I believe Intel is sticking with 14 nanometer, because they can maintain that core speed king, which is the only reason they're able to stay ahead of Ryzen, even though Ryzen has better IPC. So you've got IPC and then you've got core speed, and core speed can make up for IPC if they're close enough, which is exactly what's happening right now. So coming out with a 10 nanometer desktop processor that may not maintain that clock speed and may not maintain, or at least be enough of an IPC increase, only brings Ryzen that much closer to you. And because we know Ryzen has 12 core desktop processors on mainstream and a 16 core coming out, well, that's starting to encroach on their own X platform, which is why Intel, I think, is really taking its time on releasing this stuff. But AMD's already shown all of its cards, and it's done so with great integrity as far as I'm concerned. The marketing has not been ridiculous, which AMD tends to be known for, and Intel right now is the one, in my opinion, that's not having to necessarily play catch up, but they're definitely gonna have to pour on a little bit of throttle if they wanna stay ahead, which means we as consumers win. As long as AMD keeps its prices coming down like they are, and Intel keeps its prices ridiculously high as they're known for, well, you're gonna continue to see that market share shift, which is a good thing. All right, guys, thanks for watching today's Talking Head video. I just wanted to talk about this because I know it's going to be a hot topic this fall. AMD versus Intel. Now we just need some freaking high-end GPUs, higher-end GPUs from AMD to give NVIDIA that kick in the nuts that it really needs. I want NVIDIA's voice to go up 6 octaves. Come on, AMD, we're rooting for you. About all the specifics, Ryan Shrout, who formerly of that website he used to run. Why did I forget this? It's a 16 core, 24 thread, right? No, math? Wow. Let's try that again. AMD for Advanced Micro Devices. Why are you laughing over there? Kick NVIDIA in the nuts.
This is the most powerful.